I planted 2 of the same plants in different parts of my yard. One of them died. Enter microclimate. So what is a microclimate? Well, in the context of a home garden, a microclimate is a localized area with features that deviate from the average growing conditions of the surrounding area. These features usually affect sun exposure, wind exposure, soil moisture, humidity, and even frost dates. Assessing microclimate aspects for your yard is super valuable for the long-term success of any plantings, and it's a great first stop on any garden troubleshooting journey you may find yourself on. In this video, we're going to touch on some of those aspects and get you started on mapping out some of those microclimate details for your own space. As with anything, we can get as granular as we want with this site observation. And sometimes, especially when you're getting started, too much detail is just that, too much. So to start, we're going to aim for a roughly right approach. You can always tune it up later as you notice new elements or as your garden changes over the years. I like to stick with 3 key spectra when it comes to understanding a site's microclimate aspects. You have hot, exposed, and dry versus cool, sheltered, and wet. And using that, here's what I think is a good first steps approach in understanding your microclimate aspects. Start with drawing up your site. You don't have to be too detailed here, just include any structures or trees on your site or nearby. Now we're going to think about how the sun hits your site. For us here in the northern hemisphere, the sun rises in the east, shoots across the southern sky, and sets in the west. Morning sun is the least harsh and doesn't dry out the soil as quickly as afternoon sun, which is present during the hottest part of the day. So sun from the east is less drying, less harsh than sun from the west. And since the sunlight is coming generally from the south, anything on the north side of a structure, whether that's a house, a fence, a tree, whatever, will be caught in shadow during at least some portion of the day. Next up is wind exposure. For this one, you can just search online, prevailing winds, your area. And as with sun exposure, structures will help diffuse wind, offering some shelter on the side opposite the breeze. This may increase humidity in those sheltered areas, especially in the hotter months of the year. For example, in New Jersey, we have pretty humid summers, so highly sheltered areas are prone to mildew if airflow is not taken into consideration. Finally, we have soil moisture. I think this is the toughest one to nail, since there can be such variability in soil moisture based on recent weather. But in the presence of soil moisture issues, there are a myriad of landscaping techniques to solve any potential problems. So in understanding this aspect, we're basically assessing soil drainage here. And to get a very fine understanding of those details, we can do all sorts of tests, percolation tests, check topographical maps, do rainfall calculations. But today, we're just gonna go for good enough, because that's usually good enough. And to get this good enough understanding, you're going to have to put on your best galoshes and march yourself outside immediately after a good downpour. Operate those peepers and notice any standing water, also known as puddles. Mark them on your map and routinely check those puddles until they're gone. Did it take an hour, 24 hours, longer? Those are probably the wettest spots on your site. And if they stay too wet for too long, they hold the potential to harm your plantings. If that's the case, you'll need to amend the soil to improve drainage, find a way to divert some of that surface water, or pick plant species that are adaptable to those existing conditions. So let's put this all together here. Let's start with drawing our lot here. So you've got a nice square lot. On the square lot, we have a house. And at this house, we've got a shed. Maybe a little oak tree or something. And of course we have our compass. So we know which way is north. This would be the north side of the property. And since we know that way is north, we know this way is east. We have our little sun rising in the east, going across the sky, setting in the west. So let's start with mapping out our microclimate zones based on sun exposure. So you see here, sun rising in the east, going across the sky during the day, setting in the west. So what areas have almost no obstructions? This big old backyard right here. So let's go ahead and outline that. We've got this big old area right over here. That's zone 1. I'm leaving this little corner out for later. That'll be a surprise. Let's also assume that the property boundaries have no fences, no chain link, no privacy fence, no nothing. So nothing blocking any sun near the edges of the property, not blocking any wind either. So now we have our kind of our only but very large full sun zone. Let's look at what our part sun zones look like. So starting with the eastern part of the house here, catches sun in the morning, but as the day goes on, the house blocks the sun. So let's outline this. I'm gonna call that zone 2. Let's go to the western side of the house, kind of the opposite. So we're catching sun not in the morning, we're cast in shade in the morning, and then as the day goes on, we're getting that sun exposure. So let's go here, and even over in here by the, I guess it's the patio, this area, call that zone 3. Now, what other obstructions are present other than the house? Well, we have the shed and the tree. So similarly, we're catching plenty of sun in the morning, midday yes, later day, well, we're starting to get blocked here. So let's outline an area down here. That would be zone 4. All right, so we have our full sun and our part sun areas mapped out. What about here? What about the north side of the house? Well, as you can see, maybe it gets a peak of sun in the morning, but for the majority of the day, it's pretty much totally blocked. And then again, maybe a peak of sun in the late afternoon, depending on what time of the year it is, where we are in comparison to the summer and winter solstices, right? That'll change the angle of the sun, but we're not gonna get into that right now. We're just gonna call this full shade because it's almost always cast in shade. So we have our solar aspects mapped out. What about wind? How exposed is everything? Well, I looked up New Jersey prevailing winds and I learned that our winds come from the west and go towards the east. So what obstacles are in the way of the wind? Well, the thing that stands out the most for me is the house, of course. So on the eastern side of the home, the western winds are being blocked for the most part. So we're still outdoors, we're not totally sheltered in, this isn't a greenhouse, but we're not catching the prevailing wind. So we may have some airflow issues here. So I like to, actually, you know what, I'm gonna do this. We're gonna draw little purple X's in this zone to indicate that sometimes we have some airflow issues. Where else? Zone 5, plenty exposed. Zone 3, totally exposed. Zone 1, exposed or not exposed? Totally exposed, nothing in the way. What about zone 4? What about this area right near the shed and under the tree? Sometimes we might have some airflow issues here as well. We have the shed in the way, we have the branches from the tree, the leaves diffusing the wind, but we're not totally sheltered. Now finally we get into our water aspects. What is the soil doing on this site? What is the surface water doing? Where are the wet areas, if there are any? Well, having lived in this imaginary house, I can tell you that after a good rainstorm, very typically, I'll find a nice wet area in the back corner here in the southeast corner. And that standing water usually lasts for more than 24 hours after a typical rain event. The topsoil is usually pretty moist there unless we're in a drought or something, but this is the wettest area of the yard for sure. It's still full sun, it's still exposed, but it's quite wet. So we have our zones mapped out. Let's do a little write-up. Start with zone 1. So zone 1, we have this big zone right here in the middle. It's totally full sun. It's as hot as it gets on this property. Getting baked by the sun all day. Is it exposed? Yes. No immediate blockages, changing airflow. And is it dry or wet? Well, it's exposed, wicking away the topsoil moisture. So we have our hot, exposed, dry area. Let's go zone 2, eastern side of the house. This is part sun. So it's not quite hot, it's not getting baked all day, but it's certainly catching some rays in the AM. So we're gonna call this warm. We're gonna say it's kind of halfway between hot and cool. Is it exposed or sheltered? Well, as we said, the prevailing winds are being blocked right here next to the house, but it's still outdoors. It's no greenhouse. We'll call it part sheltered. Is it dry or wet? Well, we're gonna have to use our imagination here. In observing the site, right, we notice there's no standing water here after an immediate rainfall. Maybe the downspouts and the soil grading are all doing their job and they're moving water away from the structure, in all directions. Since it only gets morning sun and it is relatively sheltered, the topsoil tends to hold moisture better than, say, an area like Zone 1. So we're gonna call it everyone's favorite word. Say it with me. We're gonna say it's moist. Moist or average, medium, whatever you want to call it. Zone 3, same deal. It's warm, right? It gets afternoon sun as opposed to morning sun, so maybe it's a little hotter than Zone 2, but it still certainly is caught in shade for a portion of the day. So we're not going to say it's hot. Is it exposed or sheltered? Totally exposed. West facing, nothing in the way, exposed as it gets on this lot. Is it dry or wet? Same thing as Zone 2, right? It's right up against the house. Grading is doing its job. The downspouts are doing their job carrying water away from the home. But since it's more exposed and it gets the hotter sun in the day, we're gonna say it's dry over there. So we got warm, exposed, dry. Next up, Zone 4. Down here by the shed. So same deal, we're warm. Not too hot, not too cool. Get a nice blockage of afternoon sun, catching sun for most of the day otherwise. Exposed or sheltered. We got a tree, we got a shed, so we're partially exposed, partially sheltered. So we're gonna call that part sheltered. Are we dry or wet? Well, in observing the site, usually don't find any standing water there, but similarly to Zone 2 over here on the eastern side of the home, the part sheltered nature of this spot and maybe a high organic matter in the soil due to the tree, dropping its leaves every season. We're gonna say it holds onto soil moisture a little bit better than, say, Zone 3 over here that's getting baked in the afternoon sun. So we're gonna go moist average. Warm, part sheltered, moist average. Zone 5, up here on the north side of the home, hot or cool? Well, it gets almost no sun. So we're gonna call that cool. It's as cool as it gets on this site. Is it exposed or sheltered? Nothing's in the way. It's definitely getting plenty of wind, plenty of airflow, so we are exposed. Is it dry or wet? Well, it's against the house. Grading's doing its job. Downspouts are doing this job, but we're not getting that sun exposure. So through observing the site, this imaginary site, we're gonna say that the topsoil tends to be kind of moist, kind of cool, outside of drought events. So we're going to say moist average again. And last but not least, Zone 6 down here. So still a full sun environment. That's hot. Hot. Exposed or not exposed? Definitely exposed. Nothing blocking that wind. Dry or wet? Again, this comes back to site observation. So as you go out, you notice this water standing here for 48 hours. Maybe outside of a rain event you check, you notice the soil is moist, but in drought circumstances, the soil tends to dry up a little bit. So we would call this wet to average, depending on the weather. So here we have some microclimate zones on this property mapped out. We've identified 6 zones, and while we could get even more specific, even on this imaginary site, identifying 6 unique microclimate zones here is a great first step and full of totally actionable information for your next season of gardening. I hope you get to put this to use on your own property and identify some microclimate zones. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments. I'd be happy to help. If you'd like more in-depth videos on any of these topics, or you have any questions, please leave it in the comments. Thanks for watching. Hope this helped. Brian at Blue Wildscapes out.